We will now move on to the first panel of experts, which will be moderated by Indiana State Representative Earl L. Harris, Jr. State Representative Earl L. Harris, Jr. was first elected to the Indiana House of Representatives in 2016. He represents Indiana House District 2, which is within Lake County. Representative Harris serves as Assistant Democratic Floor Leader and is Ranking Democrat on the House Roads and Transportation Committee. He is also a member of the Ways and Means and Government and Regulatory Reform Committees. Representative Harris is a native of East Chicago, Indiana. He earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in Telecommunications from Indiana University, Bloomington, and a Master of Arts in Telecommunications and Digital Storytelling from Ball State University. Representative Harris has worked as a programming producer for Fox Sports Midwest and PBS. He was also the president of the Educational Television Cooperative before founding Motivation Media, a company that produces marketing and communication materials, and Emmy-nominated producer/editor of videos and TV shows. We would now like to welcome Representative Harris and the panelists to the stage.
Good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Earl Harris, State Rep for House District 2 here in Northwest Indiana. A few of us had the opportunity to stand to be recognized, but if you don't mind, if there are any other elected officials in the crowd, if you wouldn't mind standing so we can recognize you. Or city employees. All right, thank you. So this is at least my third or fourth opportunity to be involved in this event, and I have to say, and I think this was brought up earlier by a person or two, this is the biggest crowd I've seen. Thank you. So when I arrived, the line was out the door and down in front of the building, and I was impressed with the amount of growth that has happened. So thank you, Dr. Kapal and everyone else that's been involved in this. So we are going to have some quick conversation. We have about a half an hour for each panel. We're going to have some quick conversation with our experts here to talk about human trafficking. One of the things that I've learned as I've learned more about human trafficking is we think about areas like New York, like Las Vegas, maybe Los Angeles, but here actually in Northwest Indiana is one of the hot spots in the state of Indiana. Probably is related to the fact that we're across the state line from Chicago, but we have a lot of things going on here that we are continue to work on and work on preventing. One of the things that was mentioned in my introduction is I serve as the ranking minority member of Roads and Transportation, and we did have a bill that came out of the committee that has to do with CDL training and making human trafficking education part of CDL training, because what we've discovered is a lot of this happens at truck stops. So we want to make sure that the truck drivers are aware of what's going on and how they can keep an eye on what's happening and what to do if they see it. So I'm happy that that's something that we have been able to do in the legislature. All right, let's get moving with our panel. We are joined tonight by, our first person is Judge Marissa McDermott. And she serves as she's the first female judge of the Lake County Circuit Court. And then I also want to point out, she also is connected with the Hammond Boxing Club governing board, so I don't know about you, but I'm not going to talk back to her. All right, we are joined by Dr. Gopal, who is the founder and president of CHR, and why we are here working tonight and having some good conversation. We're also joined by Harold D'Souza, and I apologize if I say that wrong. He is the president of Open Eyes International, which provides wide-scale efforts to provide education, increase awareness, and stimulate prevention of domestic human trafficking. Thanks for joining us. All right, we are joined by I was giving you a new title. Apparently I'm still hungry. We are joined by Sheriff Jeffrey Ballon, right?
That's close enough.
All right. Who's from Porter County Sheriff. Thanks for joining us. I apologize for butchering everything about you. We are joined also by Porter County, another Porter County person, Porter County Prosecutor Gary Germain. So thank you for joining us. And we are also joined by AUSA Thomas McGrath. So thank you for joining us tonight. All right. Let's dive in, and I'm going to start with the judge. So as the judge, no pressure. As a judge, what kind of things do you see come across your court in terms of human trafficking here in Northwest Indiana?
You know, is this on? It's supposed to be. Is it on? Maybe. I'll try this one. This is on. I have to be honest, it's one of those things that is not, it's definitely under the radar, but we all know that it's there, right? Yeah. And we do know that it intersects a lot with issues dealing with mental health and addiction and domestic violence. So all of these things are things that, as a judge, I'm seeing on a daily basis, and I don't know necessarily whether we also have that added element of trafficking, but they all lead to the same place, which is the abuse of women. And that's something that is certainly, unfortunately, a huge part of what I see on the bench. And so as a court, we're always trying to think forward and try to think proactively about what we can do to solve this problem, because it's a little, I have to say, it was a little disheartening when I first took the bench almost 8 years ago, and I felt like, gosh, in so many instances when people walk into the courtroom, I feel like it's almost too late. What has happened in their life, by the time they get to me, they are so far down the road. So a judge can either sit there and say, well, okay, that's too late, or you can get out and you can work with other stakeholders and work with the community and try to figure out ways to avoid that from getting to that point in the first place. So I don't think I answered your question.
No, that was a good answer. Plus, you know boxing, so I'm not going to tell you to give a bad answer. All right, Dr. Gopal, and I need to give Dr. Gopal credit for something else. I mentioned the legislation that we had come through and become law that had to do with CDL training. I contacted Dr. Gopal because in the committee level is when people can come and testify, and I reached out to her, and she made the drive down to Indianapolis to make sure that she presented and spoke in committee. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, you flew in like literally flying in, testified, and then took off because she had an appointment. So I really want to give her credit and thank you for making that sacrifice. So let's get to the fact that you started this organization. What prompted you, and what made this one of those things where you saw, here's what's happening and I need to get involved and do something about it?
So about 25 years ago, I had a little girl when I was a student at Vanderbilt, a little girl who sat in my lap, and she said she was being touched by her father, and I honestly had no clue what to do. And so I went to my supervisor and I said, look, I love my dad, I don't think I can handle this. And I was a doctoral student. And so what got me finally into this, segued me actually into this. It's working, yeah, okay. What segued me into this was the belief that children will talk, children will speak if they feel safe. They're just like adults. If you don't feel safe, we don't talk either, do we? So gradually over the years, I had more and more cases of child sexual assault coming to me from all over the country. And then I was testifying, before you know it, almost on a weekly to bi-weekly basis on cases of national importance, which was a little frightening for me because I was a doctoral student, and then I started my own practice, and I was from another country, and so it was a whole different cultural experience for me at a level I didn't want. But the joy was knowing that we could bring justice to these children, and I think that's what makes us do what we do. And many of these girls later on were disappearing as teenagers, and that's what segued me into human trafficking, because often our teenagers are the most vulnerable. And even more so now, because it's 200% more than what it used to be. So that's how I got into the field.
Thank you. Mr. D'Souza, you are involved with providing education, increasing awareness, making sure people know what's going on with human trafficking. What kind of things do you hear from people who learn what you teach them and their reaction to the fact that human trafficking is taking place here?
Yeah, thank you very much. But first and foremost, can I hold your hand? Yeah, so for me, Dr. Gopal is like Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa always said, do not waste time. No, that's true. Seriously, don't say that, but just love them. And she has done that from day one, from I think 2014. And that is why I'm here. And I want to hold Sheriff Jeffrey's hand. Can I hold it, sir? Because my trafficker told me, in my trafficking situation, if I tell my friend Sheriff like this, he should put his finger, he will get you arrested, handcuffed, jailed, and deported. Today, he is here with me. And same way with the judge, being trauma-informed is very important. And even the prosecutors, So today, it's a pure reflection, friends. If I'm sitting here, it's all your credit that you are doing in helping survivors to thrive. That's very important. And what Dr. Gopal has been doing is beyond imagination. She believes in reality. I just want to share that I want to acknowledge my wife, Dancy, if she can stand up, and my son, Rohan D'Souza. He's here. So please can you stand up for a minute? So, my older son cannot be here. His name is Bradley D'Souza. He's in California. But you didn't, help one person, but you saved 4 people's life. And what Dr. Gopal said, I always believe in the human rights of the United Nations. Like Article 1 says, everyone is born free and equal. Article 4 says, no slavery. And Article 5 says, no torture. So thank you very much. I always believe that survivors should be thriving. We have to empower them, because especially labor trafficking is very huge in the United States of America. And I was told by my trafficker that Americans do not like brown-skinned guys, which is a false thing. And I just want to end on one note that Martin Sheen is doing a documentary on labor trafficking on me. The teaser trailer is out, To Be Free. Next year there will be a Bollywood biopic blockbuster film on my story from India to the White House. Thanks to Dr. Gopal and all of you. God bless America and God bless you.
All right, thank you. Sheriff, you're in Porter County. What kind of activities, what kind of work is being done in Porter County to make sure that people are aware in the community of what's happening in terms of human trafficking and violence against women?
I would say it's a multifaceted approach, right? You have education and awareness, okay? You have outreach, and then you have training. So, one of the things that we've done in Porter County at the Sheriff's Office is we've hired 2 social workers, okay, that focus on outreach and education, and they also reach out to domestic violence victims, and they do follow-ups. They educate the victims on what type of services are available to them, which is very important. Other things that we've done is we train our new officers and our jail officers during the screening process of intake, because there's also nonverbal cues that you have to look for when you're dealing with victims, because they may not be, vocal about what's going on in their lives, okay? And so you have to look for things such as, with women with no ID, no phones, things like that, things that there's a control factor there that keep them isolated. And so you have to look at that. You have to look at self-arrests. We've had experiences in the Porter County Jail where a victim of trafficking took the blame for narcotics in a vehicle to get away, okay, from that person. And what you also have to do is you have to have that outreach inside, or even, outside of that, where people will feel comfortable approaching the officers, approaching our sheriff's office, our staff, okay, to bring that information forward. And so it's also important that we train our officers and our detectives what to look for, because oftentimes, a lot of times it's what you see in the movies, right? And it's not that's where a lot of the general public think, okay, somebody's being taken from a home, they're taken off the streets, but there's so much more to the trafficking. You have to look at, sexual abuse of children, okay, because lots of times where that victim and that child victim is being harmed by the perpetrator, there are also other perpetrators in that circle. Okay, so you have to train your investigators to be aware of what to look for as well. And that's the biggest thing. And what we've also done, we've put placards, we've put pamphlets in our jail, in our patrol division. Sometimes, you have to have, there's victims of trafficking that are ordered to go to jail to get people that have been incarcerated out, okay? And so they'll go in there, and if they give them one little piece of information to make sure that they're aware that there's places and there's communities and there's programs in place to protect them, that's a huge first step. So those are the things that we're doing over in Porter County.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Prosecutor, we actually heard from the sheriff some of the hard parts about this and how identification can be hard. In terms of prosecuting, what kind of challenges do you face?
I would say any case involving, this is off. I would say any case involving a single witness is probably the most difficult case that we would prosecute. Whether it's any type of a sexual assault, child molesting, human trafficking. And first of all, we would need a witness. And not all witnesses are willing to not necessarily just come forward, but to see the case through to the end. And let's face it, the criminal justice system isn't exactly user-friendly because the witnesses are subjected to depositions, delays, and then they have to go to court and testify in front of 12 strangers that sit on a jury. I think the problems for us are just making sure that we have made our witnesses comfortable and establish a huge amount of trust in us. So the preparation that goes into these cases is super intense. I may meet with the victim of a crime 7 or 8 times, and maybe the first 3 or 4 meetings are just to establish trust. I'm a male, many times they're females. It could be a small child, it could be a teenager, it could be an adult. But the devil's in the details. I want to understand everything that there is about this particular person, because I want to be able to paint that picture to a jury who may be very skeptical about the story that's being told. And all of these cases are going to revolve around, as I said, a single witness and being able to establish their veracity beyond a reasonable doubt. If this were a training for our trial lawyers, it'd probably be a week long. I know that in our cases now, as we teach our detectives, no stone can be left unturned. Juries expect that now. And so we have to be very sensitive to the kinds of facts that juries are going to react to favorably. But again, these are some of the most difficult cases that we handle. Many times much more difficult than a murder case or a burglary case or another kind of a case, just because it's a single witness. But I love the work. I love getting to know them, and I do my best to remove the shame. And at some point, we're going to own their story because owning the story makes it believable.
Thank you. All right, Mr. McGrath, thank you for being with us. What are some of the common misconceptions about trafficking that we need to deal with, educate people about, or dispel?
Yeah, I think it's been brought up a little bit here that a lot of people through media and through TV, there is this perception that this is always some stranger taking a child from somewhere to another place and then holding them. It's a much, much broader problem than that. A lot of times it's a parent who will sell access to their child to somebody else. It's a teacher or a coach that is directly offering a minor something of value for a sexual relationship. That is trafficking. It's, as Mr. D'Souza says, it is all the labor trafficking of going out to another country, sending a promise of a job and sending a promise of one life, and then when you get there, it's a drastically different life, and then they have no choices to go in. And then I think that there's also this misconception that it's always force, it's always violence. And there is a lot of coercion and fraud that goes into this. There is the threats of deportation, there is the threats to reputation is one of them that can be done. There's a lot of ways to do this. And I think another misconception is that when you don't see a human trafficking conviction or a prosecution, that's either not happening here or it's not being combated. And we take a holistic approach to this. If we can't get someone in human trafficking, or we have a victim who needs support who is not ready to do that, a survivor who's not ready to do that, we'll find another way. We will look at them for a drug charge, we will look at them for gun charges, we will look at them for anything that we can take them on, and take that as a success in both getting a survivor out and helping them to move on, while also finding some way to combat this. So it is out there and we are going after it, but you may not see headline after headline when you do it.
So I'm going to stay with you. What are the biggest challenges you face, or we face, in terms of addressing trafficking?
I think Gary said one of them, which is that a lot of times, unfairly and unfortunately, it puts a lot of pressure on a survivor. We do everything we can to find corroborating evidence. We do everything we can to find a way to do this where you won't need the survivor to stand there, but you almost always comes down to a survivor being willing to and able to stand up and tell their story, which is why all the things with Dr. Gopal and Ashley House and everything. And I think law enforcement, sometimes I'll take the thing, we're a little slow on getting to that you need the survivor to have all of their base needs taken care of. You need to give them the time to do this, and then you come across it. We are always the ones that are like, we want to get the person now, we want to get the controller now. But if we don't have someone feeling in a safe place, we're not going to be helping them, we're not going to be helping a case. So all of the work that is being done through Ashley House and all of this is really what helps us, in the end, get to where we need to go by helping the survivor and getting the trafficker off the street.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. So, Mr. Prosecutor, I am a state legislator. There are some other state legislators and future state legislators in the room. What kind of things can we do on the legislative side to help you stop and do what you can to prevent human trafficking from happening?
Yeah, I looked at our statute this afternoon before I came, and honestly, I don't think much. We have a protected persons statute, which would potentially enable a victim to testify outside of court and appear in court by video conferencing, or their statement may be able to be read in court. The penalties, I think, are sufficient. To answer that question, as I thought about it, the answer is nothing right now that I can think of.
So we're doing a great job.
You're doing a great job. Yes, you are.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Similar question for you, Sheriff. What kind of support can we provide in terms of helping prevent violent crimes from happening?
Money. I mean, honestly, that's what a lot of it comes down to, the almighty dollar. It takes a lot of money to inform the public. It takes a lot of money to train our officers. What also takes a lot of money is to support the victims that we were able to initially get out of that environment. Okay, and once they leave the shelter, then what happens? Where do they go? So we have to find money that gives them an avenue to break away from their abusers, from the people who have control of them, and that's a big thing that we've experienced in Porter County. How do we get those people, and how do we break the cycle where they're not forced back into that lifestyle? So it really, in my experience and what I'm seeing, is it really comes down to one of the big hurdles is the funding.
Thank you. Thank you. So we are joined via Zoom by, I hope I pronounced his name correctly, Arun Dole, who was adopted by a German couple from an Indian orphanage during his year-long struggle to obtain his right to know the identity of his mother. Arun teamed up with Indian civil rights activists. Are you with us, Arun? Is he there? Is he on the screen? Okay. Can you hear us? I'm not sure if he can hear us.
trying to connect.
Okay. All right, we'll come back. So, sorry. How do we unmute?
Who's on the laptop?
All right, we're going to give a moment for the technical side to go through. We're going to go back to you, Mr. D'Souza. Can you give us a brief? So one of the things that happens is people don't know human trafficking happens. And again, it's not just on the sexual side, it's on the labor side, et cetera. Can you give us a quick idea of what kind of things we should look for so that we can help out someone that may be trafficked in front of us and we don't know it?
Yeah, I want to share about the red flags, the problems, the solutions, and resources. The biggest challenge for foreign nationals, I'm talking whether it's a boy or a girl, is that there is no male shelter home in the United States of America. So because of foreign nationals, they need 4 things. You need safety, security, stability, and shelter. If we have this in place, there will be a lot of people who will come out. And Dr. Kalyani Gopal is working to start a male shelter home. So we are collaborating with Isopol International. So maybe next year when I'm here for this conference, we will have one male shelter home in place. That's one. Yeah. We are really working very closely on that. Number 2 is that there are a lot of resources available. People are not aware. If you are a victim of human labor trafficking or even sex trafficking, and if you are a foreign national, you don't have passport, no documentation, I think Sheriff Jeffrey and other delegates will endorse me that there is resources available like continued presence status, a U visa, a T visa, a permanent residency card, and eventually a US citizenship. Because FBI agent did that for me. And today I'm a brand new US citizen in the United States of America. After 20 years. I'll just end on one note, friends, that making a mistake is not a mistake. Making no mistake is a mistake. Repeating a mistake is a big mistake. But learning from a mistake, like what I did, and helping the community members worldwide to live your life with happiness, peace, and freedom is not a mistake, and that is what we all are doing. Thank you very much. Again, God bless America, and God bless Dr. Kalyani Gopal.
Thank you. All right, we're almost at the end here. We're almost running out of time. I want to get in a couple of more questions. Dr. Gopal, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Mr. D'Souza. What kind of things do people need to look for so that they can hopefully identify and stop human trafficking from happening?
So especially for those who work in hospitals or work in the community as advocates, DCS workers, for example, what you're looking for 3 major things. 1, is this a young person who is scared to speak? And you need to know why she's scared to speak. Sometimes they're scared to speak only because they're leaving their family. But is there something else going on? The school grades drop. They have phones that don't belong to them. They wear clothes that they don't normally wear at home. They leave at odd hours. They have to have the phone with them at night, especially they're terrified if their phones are taken from them. It's not just angry with you for taking your phones, it's fear. So there's a difference between fear and anger, and you want to look for that fear in that child. And you're also looking about relationships. What if they have a boyfriend or a female friend who's far older than them, and they're disappearing and they're going to, say, libraries they say they're going to, but they're actually going someplace else. So there's very many signs you can look at. The biggest thing you want to do in intervention is not jump the gun and say, okay, this child is probably trafficked, but get to know what the child wants, what the child lacks. And once you know what the child lacks, then you can find what the child wants. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Judge, we're wrapping up with you. I actually want to go back to something you said in the your first answer, when you talked about how where you are in the process, you really see people towards the later part, and that there's things they can do ahead of time. Give us some advice. What kind of things should people look for and do so that they hopefully don't end up where you are or in your court, but they can actually stop things before it goes that far?
Well, I think I heard it down the table here, but education is so important as far as awareness and understanding what is healthy and what is unhealthy. I think because there's so little understanding about trafficking in the regular population, it's happening, people don't realize it's happening. So obviously, awareness, and everybody in this entire room is helping raise awareness to that. But that being said, just because it's so far down the road doesn't mean that courts can't do things. And the doctor said something when we started about tearing down the silos. That is something that we talk about in circuit court all the time, tearing down the silos, not becoming a court that sits in an ivory tower, waits for things to come to us, rules on them, and never sees or thinks about them again. Instead, meeting with the medical providers, meeting with the jail staff, meeting with the prosecutor, meeting with other judges, and trying to figure out a way to holistically look at this problem and not only be looking at one tiny part of it at a time.
So it's really the community.
Absolutely.
The community.
Yeah. Everybody has to come together. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot more difficult to combat.
All right. Thank you. Let's give them a applause. So I want to wrap up by going with that, what the judge just said, or what we just talked about. It really is a community effort. All of you are here because you know that this is an issue. You know that this is an issue that we need to work on preventing and stopping. And so thank you for being part of the community to work on preventing and slowing down and hopefully one day stopping human trafficking. Thank you again.